Perspectives. So welcome to Mental Perspectives. I think it's season 2, episode 3, I believe. It might be wrong. Today my guest is Festus, who's like a long-term member of the community by now. And we're going to talk about game development and all that. So yeah, feel free to introduce yourself.
Okay, so most of you probably know me from chats. I'm Festus. I'm a video game programmer in the virtual reality sector. And, well, my story is of a guy that dropped everything he was doing at the age of 30 and became a game developer. And now I'm a lead programmer in a company called 3R Games, or Triple R Games. And we make games for Oculus Quest, or right now Meta Quest 2. And our last game was the port of Thief Simulator, which was the third best-selling game for about 3 months on Quest.
That's really solid. So first I would be interested in like how did that go? How did you decide to become a game dev and like where were you at then when you decided to do so?
Well, the decision was, I don't know if that was really a decision. It was the result of being stuck in a rut for years. Because to provide some context, I was a musician before. I played metal music, like progressive thrash, like a combination of those. We had a band that did a little bit of touring, never really reached popularity. And I had a guitar school in which I taught young people how to play guitar, metal guitar. And I was too dumb to realize that if you live in a small town in the middle of nowhere, nobody was really going to drive to you. I mean, I had popularity, but it wasn't enough to, to pay the bills and everything. And I was very disappointed by my composing skills in music, which was the main factor of me learning to play in the first place. So after about 8 or 10 years of that, I was stuck and I didn't know what to do. I was too stubborn to move out, and I didn't have the money to move out of the little town. And my mother said to me at one point, "Look, there's this competition held in town currently for children, for teenagers, to make a video game. There was a course paired with that and all that. And they were taught to make the video game, and then they did it, and that was graded. And the winners got a grant for university, for game design course, 3-year, a bachelor's degree." And she said to me, "Well, you're not a kid anymore, but you can try. There's no age limit." So I did, and I won.
I love that.
And that funded the first year of the education, which turned out to be not very good. Because that was a game design course, mainly. That was advertised as game design course, but in reality, for the first year, there was very few game design things in it. But mainly graphics design. Like, it seemed that it was an evolved course from a graphic design, and they put game design on top of it. So I, in parallel, started to teach myself programming and game development from that side. And by the time I was finished with the studies, I was mostly a programmer, not a designer. I still have some skills in that, but I'm mostly a programmer. And by the time I was making my thesis, I reached out to a couple of companies that were looking for junior developers, and I wrote to them, "Look, I have no skill, but I can work for free," because I had to do practice for studies.
Yeah.
And I can work for free, and if you guys have me, that would be great. And I sent them some stuff I made, and each and every one of those companies responded with a job offer.
Wow.
So that was my entry point, and that doesn't speak to my ability. That speaks to the fact that the market is very undernourished when it comes to programmers. So you can get in just knowing the bare minimum.
I mean, but that's pretty cool still.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I was very lucky. Because if I wasn't to start working at that point, I would be left with a kind of useless degree in hand and no perspective still. But I got in, so that was lucky, and that was the starting point. Yeah.
Are you still with the first job offer you took, or did you change?
Oh no! Oh no! That was a good company. Do you want me to take you through my track record?
I mean, if you think so, that's good. Yeah, let's go.
Well, I was in 3 companies. Each of those is quite the story. Well, the first one was as if someone started making software in a little booth near a stadium. The quality of work was on that level. Okay. It's like a burger booth, but with software. We were making marketing things like marketing apps for Coca-Cola, where you could download an app during a promotional period of an event, and then play some sounds, make some music, download it, and it was paired with an advertisement. We made VR experiences that were made for events like you have cons, for instance, right? Mm-hmm. So you have those booths that have some funny thing in them that can be promotional or something like that. We did roller coasters, shooting simulations, everything very simple, just to sell it and be done with it.
Okay.
And well, that was the entire thing. The workload was quite difficult because the first thing when I got there as a junior developer, I couldn't do much, and I got there, nobody was there, so I came back to my dorm because I hired a dorm to live in. And I came back the next day and, we've got a new programmer. Nobody told us. So
beautiful.
I sat at the desk they showed me, and the guy came to me and he said, look, there's this application an outside studio was working on for 3 months. They can't get it running. You have 2 weeks to make it happen. I'm like, well, okay, if the senior programmer can guide me through the steps, I'll be okay. I can manage. And then all the programmers left 2 months ago.
Oh, fuck. Yeah.
And I managed. The workload was very intense. And this ended up being working on a single programmer was working on 2 or 3 projects at the same time. Mm-hmm. So this was very, very demanding, and it wasn't very good for development of my skills because switching contexts all the time was very hard on retaining information.
Definitely, yeah.
So yeah, that company fell apart when the owners just started bickering with themselves, the usual failure story. So I jumped ship. And I jumped ship with my friends from work, one manager who was a great manager, one of the best managers I've ever worked with in any company. Mm-hmm. I'll talk about him later. But and another programmer, they were looking for jobs earlier because they smelled what was going to happen, and it turned out they met independently of each other in the same company for a talk about a job. And the job was quite unusual because they were to be hired for completing an application for Saudi Arabian government, essentially. Okay. It was an educational app. And they invited me basically because they were lacking one programmer. So I stuck with them, and that was a whole lot of can of worms, a big can of worms. Because to provide some context to that, first off, the application was made by 5 different studios over the course of 6 years.
Oh, Lord.
And it was huge. And none of those studios knew what they were doing. It was the typical junior farm, as I call it, where they take the lowest paid, lowest grade junior programmers, tell them to make as much as they can before they burn out, and then they toss them. It's popular in India and then all that Western Asia. So that was what we got. And the problem with that was that this wasn't the only problem. The second problem was that we were working with another culture. Yeah. Because our bosses were Saudi. And what we found out is that the approach to business and building is very different from the Western one. Because if you have a problem and you're a Westerner, you go to a specialist and tell him your problem and tell him what you want, right?
Yeah.
And they don't do that. They come to you and they say, well, we want to make a thing that's similar to this, but not really. Well, it's all on you. Like, no feedback, no real definition of problem, no constraints, no anything. You have to mind read. That was very difficult.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. So there was a lot of tensions, a lot of micromanagement when things got tense. We were understaffed and they didn't want to hire anyone else, so we worked really hard. I believe that was the first time I did 20-hour work shifts, including weekends, for weeks on end, like 2 or 4 weeks, then a week normal, then 2 or 3 weeks again. It wasn't very good for any kind of health.
Yeah, I can imagine.
High pressure. And we finished that. And I remember, because they have this sort of lifestyle, the higher ups at that investor, let's say that, because we've worked with Saudi Aramco, which is the biggest oil company in the world. They run Saudi Arabia essentially alongside of the royal family. And they have a very specific style of doing business, because they come to you, to a country they do business with, and they are expected to be entertained.
Okay.
Like, we've come to them with a nearly ready application, in the sense that we get feedback, that we'll talk specifics. And no, they wanted to discuss ideas for future applications. They wanted to see the city. They wanted to, well, they didn't want to have anything done with the application, and we didn't know if that was okay or not.
Oh, no.
And there was like 2 or 3 meetings like that. And the manager, let me come back to him. He was the kind of guy that would do anything to make sure that everyone on the team was doing okay. And he was a very, very responsible person. And that turned against him very quickly, because the bosses up high piled all responsibilities onto him, including the mind reading. So he was crushed, we were crushed, and by the time when we were done, when we thought we were done, they sort of went into a tantrum, sort of. They broke all contact with us.
Okay.
They took the application, and to my knowledge, to this day, this application is not released, which is ridiculous, because that was an online learning app for mobile and for web. And we released it by the time coronavirus hit.
Oh, God.
So there was big money in that, and they just tossed it aside. So that was the end of my story with them. And I ended up here in 3R Games, which is quite another story. I don't know if you want to hear that, because the project almost failed.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, this is a horror story after another horror story.
I mean, but it's also a story about overcoming obstacles, so I like it.
Yeah, let's go. So this looked like this. 3R company existed earlier. They were doing some other stuff, and then we were brought on board, and they were doing applications, business applications, they did something for the government. They did an architecture application where you could position furniture in a room for a furniture company, small stuff like that. And then the investors got the rights to an IP, which is the Thief Simulator, which is not a very good game, but it's a very popular game. It's cheap and it's fun. And they thought, well, this VR thing seems promising, so maybe we'll just make a port of this game onto the Quest 2, which is selling very well, which has a low barrier of entry, because you don't have to have a PC.
Yeah,
no cable, and you don't have to have a PC for that. And they brought 3 programmers on board and some artists. I was one of the programmers.
Mhm.
And our first task was to establish whether this can be done. And I wasn't the lead. I was just like a senior guy for some reason. I was marketed as a senior guy. I had no idea what I was doing still, also, I thought. And when there was this first meeting, I was introduced as a senior programmer. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
All right.
That's fine. And there was like a junior guy who we've deemed unusable, and he was let go. But there was 2 senior guys, including me, and a lead guy.
Mhm.
And the lead guy was in charge of setting up everything, as the lead role is. And he gave us some tasks. We did something and some things, and then later he declared to the investors that this is absolutely doable, and we trusted his judgment. And we went on with the production, and a few months pass, like 2 or 3, and we're trying to port this thing, and that thing is a big open world game that struggles to run on a modern PC. And we are trying to port it over onto the Quest 2, which has the specs of a mobile phone. Can you see the problem in that?
This is a pretty obvious problem, and I assume it's probably not even the most powerful mobile phone.
No. It's like the lower bracket of the gaming phone, so to speak. I had the more bulky ones. I mean, it is quite powerful, but the game is just too big.
Yeah.
So, and we're trying to like just modify the existing game because we've got the source to run on it, but it's just impossible. The code quality is just so abysmal. And I know why, because the publishing studio that does these kind of games just hires very, very young programmers and developers that have little experience and just sells their ideas further, no matter how developed they are. And, well, they hit the jackpot with the Thief Simulator because there was no game like this since Thief 4 came out in 2013.
So great idea, but mediocre execution, yeah.
Mediocre. They're patching it still. But it is fun. Like sneaking, I know for you it's not, but there are people who find sneaking and stealing and being in places they shouldn't be fun.
Yeah, I heard that.
So there was potential there. But it was just too low quality. I mean, we managed to launch this game on the Quest after like a month of work, and we had 2 frames. Literal 2 frames per second.
That's not ideal in VR.
No. And
so maybe as a quick time, and what does that mean? That means you get like 2 pictures per second?
Yeah.
Which is, even with a very untrained eye, you're very clearly able to tell that is not smooth motion.
Yes, that's basically the amount of image switches that happen on your screen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And for that to feel somewhat smooth, you need to have at least 30. Modern is like 60 plus, but for VR, this is 72 for the Quest, a minimum.
Yeah.
And other than that, it's going to feel like a PowerPoint presentation with someone with like Parkinson's pressing the buttons.
Yeah. And also maybe to explain that, because the screens are a lot closer to your eye, you're like a lot more, how do you say it? How do you call that? You're more vulnerable to a lower frame rate. And it also has to be unsynced. It's
immediately noticeable. And also, since the brain has real trouble distinguishing between reality and the game, when you're like cut off from the real world by the headset, it induces like motion sickness and all that and confusion. Even when it's like 40, 50, 60 FPS. And we had 2.
Yeah.
So the cat was out of the bag, and to my surprise, nobody seemed to care. Like, I told the lead that I don't think we can make it. And he's like, well, what do you think we should do? And I'm all like, well, I think we should write this from scratch. Like, just discard everything, write the game from ground up. And he's like, well, won't this be too lengthy? Won't this take too much time? And I say to him, well, we can either make this in a little bit more time or don't make this at all. And I don't think you want to be left with a non-functional product when the investors ask, where's the game?
Exactly.
Yeah, at least have something done.
Sure.
So I took the other programmer and embarked on a journey, and we've worked for a week straight just to make the tutorial area with like walking, picking up items, and just the most basic stuff. And we managed that. So the lead asks me, well, why don't you make a timetable of how much time it will take to complete this game? Which is obviously his job, not mine.
Yeah.
But the idiot that I were back then said, well, I made the demo. That's my responsibility. I'll make the timetable. And I thought, well, maybe in 3 or 4 months we can have the majority made. Just eyeballing it completely. And to my big surprise, that little Excel table ended up as the only and main offering to the shareholders because we are publicly traded. There was no other documents. It was only this, and there was my name on it.
Oh, God.
So that was a little red flag, wasn't it?
I feel like it's a lot of pressure all of a sudden.
Yeah, it was a lot. And, well, the only thing I could do was just work more. And I tried to make as much as possible, but since I wasn't the lead and I had no experience making big games, and this was a big game, I obviously underestimated everything.
Yeah.
So, like, 2 months pass, and we're nowhere. And to my... I mean, I wasn't suspect. I was holding the guy, our lead, in high regard because he was like a doctor, engineer, and all mysterious.
Yeah.
And I wasn't getting any feedback from him, or I wasn't getting any directions from him. He's like, well, you told it us. You told it up. You make it. And he was supposed to make like performance reviews. Performance for the game, not for us.
Yeah.
So we would make a demo and then verify that it works as it should, because the deal with Facebook and Meta is that if your game doesn't hold 72 FPS at all times, you will not get published. Even if you have a ready game, you will just get thrown out.
I mean, I guess that makes sense from their standpoint. You don't want people to get like motion sick and throw the quest away. Like their name is on the stand too.
That's understandable. That's understandable. But the game was just too big, right?
Yeah.
So that was our problem. But nonetheless, he was supposed to make performance reviews. And we were signaling to him that this is not yet good. And this is a problem because we have bare bones, like a few buildings and a bit of terrain and a few bugs thrown in for decoration into the interior of the building. And we don't hold 72. That is not good, because when we throw in more stuff and NPCs and whatever else, this is going to tank. And his response was, well, we will turn off the anti-aliasing and everything will be okay.
Okay.
And for your information, because this isn't obvious, when you turn off the anti-aliasing in a computer game, like on a flat screen, it looks a bit jagged.
Yeah.
But the Quest has the screen very close to your eye.
Yeah.
And when the edges between the pixels become apparent,
okay, yeah, I can see the
horrible.
Yeah.
It looks like 98. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. It's just so blocky. And that was his solution, which everyone higher up accepted. That's fine, man. We'll just make it that way. And
so
that
yeah,
wasn't...
maybe to explain what would happen then. So because I feel like if you have ever played like a PC game before, it's relatively clear. You have an idea what that does. But for someone that probably hasn't played a lot of games, so if you turn that off, that means that there is no smoothing between pixels, right?
Yes.
So every pixel stands for itself and has sharp corners, and having that in front of your eye would be like, I don't know, looking at a bunch of Legos.
Yeah, exactly. That's the impression. Like you make a pyramid out of Legos, right?
Yeah.
What your textures will look like.
I could also see that there would be some kind of weird flickering with that. Or no?
Yeah, because you kind of have a pixel switch between two objects, right? When you move a camera, this will flicker too, right? That's correct. And what was I? Oh yeah, the higher ups accepted it.
Yeah.
Like, the lead says we can turn off the anti-aliasing and everything will be okay.
Yeah.
So that was a red flag for me because I thought we were trying to deliver a quality experience, not a blocky blob. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have anywhere to go because all the higher ups were like okay with this. Mm-hmm. And I talked to our designer, who was like a consultant introduced for the needs of this project, and later was to be design new games. Mm-hmm. I talked to him and I told him that, and he was like pale. He didn't know.
Oh. And
he asked me can you like make this run smooth? Any method that makes it look good?
Yeah.
I told him, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not a graphics pipeline expert. I can try. Mm-hmm. So I took the other programmer and we dug deep to keep the anti-aliasing on, but use some smart tricks to keep the processing to a minimum level so we can keep the 70 frames.
Yeah.
And we managed it, and I showed it to him, and he talked with the shareholders. Mm-hmm. And there was, well, I will not discuss company internals at this point.
Yeah.
But the shareholders weren't happy, and they started asking a lot of questions. And then the lead said something I will never forget. He said, "Well, why are you rocking the boat? As long as they're paying us, it's okay."
Which is very far away from the expectation of delivering a quality product.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I pulled the trigger. I told the designer who was talking with the shareholders that this is going to burn and crash. The lead has no idea how to pull us out of this place. Mm-hmm. And well, everyone was fired from the old crew from this company. Mm-hmm. Like everyone was let go. And suddenly I was the new lead.
Well,
which didn't make my position any better. So I had to figure out how to make all this work, and this is just lots of technical talk which I'm having trouble to convey in a simple manner, like off the cuff. So if you have questions about that, I'm maybe able to answer them. But like skipping all the process, we were able to finally release that in July last year.
Yeah.
To a very positive reception, which was amazingly surprising for me because I thought we were going to crash and burn. People were having fun with the game.
That's great.
Came to our Discord and they told us this is the best game they ever played. So that was surprising, and the game sells to this day, and we are extending it. So that was a big leap. That was a big chance to take. It worked out somehow. To this day, I don't know how, but we made it work, and that's nice.
That's amazing, yeah. So could you keep like the full size of the previous game, or did you need to cut it down massively?
We made it bigger.
Even bigger? Holy shit.
Yeah, because after the initial failures of just trying to contain the sheer amount of stuff in this game, it was clear that just using Unity as it is, because we are using the Unity engine, one of the engines that's very popular to make games with, like the other one is Unreal. But we had no Unreal developers and no experience, so stuck with Unity.
Yeah.
There was some bypassing to be done of the usual things that Unity does to graphics, to physics management.
Yeah.
So we've like designed systems that hide some things from the engine, so to speak, in a smart manner, where if the player doesn't really have to interact with something, it's getting hidden, it's getting taken out of processing. And when that was done, we really realized that we actually have some space still. So while we don't have detail in the graphics, because everything is cut down, the GPU on the Quest 2 is just, it's got an amazing CPU, but no graphical processing power, especially when you have a huge terrain like we do.
Yeah.
And while the graphics aren't very, very nice, we've upped the interactability of the world. So, for example, in the original game, only the things you could steal from houses were movable. And in our game, you can move and touch everything.
Yeah, which makes it a lot better for VR, I get that, yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't feel as artificial, right? If you see something that seems like it can move, it should move. So we did that and ended up with a little under 5,000 interactive items on the first map. That's a lot, because usually games that even have big maps don't have that many interactable items, right? There's just a few core gameplay items and a few ragdolls for some games. But we managed that.
That's impressive.
Yeah, so in this sense, the game is bigger than the original.
Yeah, pretty nice. Okay, so I always feel like people have a misconception of being a game developer, because like I feel like the public image is like a game developer is a guy that, you know, writes a story and then he makes the entire game and also like creates all the characters. So let's say someone wants to become a game developer, what can they expect?
Well, it depends on which part of the game development pipeline you would like to be part of, like graphics or design or programming, right? And even when you're a programmer, there's like subsets of programming different.
Okay.
And it can differ drastically between the disciplines, because if you're an artist, let's say, you get like directions that you should make this object, this should look like this should look like that, and you just chip away at your pace, and try to deliver. And you always have to keep in mind that like 80% of what you do will be thrown out, because making a game is an iterative process. And sometimes you make your best work and it stops fitting the game's vision. It gets thrown out, which is very sad.
Yeah.
Then you've got, well, maybe I can speak for the programmers because that's what I do.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Like from my perspective, this probably seems very boring from the outside, because I work with optimization. I work with core systems that hold the game together. Nobody sees that. No player interacts with that. So I just make sure that we have something to run the content we make with. That's called, I guess, an engine programmer in some sense, which I have to put in quotes, because engine programmers usually make and modify the engine, which is not the case with Unity because it's closed source. But if you like work with the internals, then you're an engine programmer, I guess. Then you have gameplay programmers, which is probably something that people think overall game programming is.
Yeah, likely.
Gameplay programmers program interactions in the game's world that the user, the player, comes in contact with, right? So, for instance, I've got two junior guys, well, now mid guys, they're not junior anymore, that programmed practically everything that the player comes in contact with, all the poses of their VR hand on items, the way the items bounce off of things, the way they shatter, the way NPCs come in contact with doors, everything, every little detail. That's gameplay programmers.
Okay.
Then you have rendering specialists, like technical artists. These are the guys that sit between the code and the picture on your screen. It's the graphical pipeline that processes all the objects on scene and makes them into an image. How good that image is, it depends on them.
Okay, yeah.
So there's subsets and subsets and subsets. And the thing that's worth mentioning is that if you're an indie, you will have to know most of those areas in an above average way to pull your game off. Because suddenly, like, your designer says, well, we need a thing to happen. We need like an overlay on the screen that tells us something that indicates a effect. And then you need to
cut
put
out
on
a bit.
your...
Can you repeat the last part?
Okay. So your designer says, we need this to display something on screen that's like a status effect indicator, like an overlay or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you have no graphics expert on the team who's going to do it.
Yeah.
Like, your engine doesn't provide that functionality for the Quest 2, for instance. You have to have above mediocre knowledge of the subject to just make it. Not even make it good, just make it in a timely fashion. Same goes for AI. Same goes for optimization. I'm lucky to be an optimization specialist in that manner, so that's not that bad for me. But I had to make AI from scratch, and I'm still making it. Because the first AI we've came up with was so bad. The most advertised patch for us to date is the AI update.
Okay.
So I'm still switching to that, right? And the guys too, like the guys, my programmers, like, they do gameplay programming mostly, but then they do assets verifications, and they're okay. They do tools for graphic artists, for me, for themselves, to make the game like faster, more comfortably. Like, everyone has a lot of hats. Yeah. So that's what you have to be prepared for. Like, to put this in like an artist's perspective, our artists double as beta testers, like quality assurance.
Okay.
We have like two QA guys, but this is just not enough for a game that big. So everyone tests. This is the reality of working as an indie.
Well, I guess that's very like comparable to like working in most smaller companies, where you will rarely just do like the one thing you're hired for. You usually do like all the things to make the company somehow work.
Yeah. But I think the thing that might differ here is that you can't just know the bare minimum to fill the position, because this will become the product, the game's weak spot that will drag it down eventually, because games are art, naturally. And like a glaring weak spot will destroy the whole experience.
Yeah, true. So if we look at that from the other side, let's say I'm average Andy, and I'm deciding I want to be a game dev, or I want to like kind of help create games. Let's put it a little bit more broadly. Is there like something you say that should nudge you in a specific direction? Like, for example, okay, I really like, I don't know, making art. Obviously, you would probably go somewhere in the art direction. But if you like, I don't know, are good with math, or like solving puzzles, or you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'd say is that just watch some YouTube on the topic, right? There's just an ocean of entry-level stuff on GameDev. A large portion of it is wrong or outdated. Okay. Just have that in mind. But the general sense, the field you want to do, should be contained somewhere in there. Just watch a few videos. And the second thing is that practice trumps everything in this field, and in many others too. But you should get practical as soon as possible, even if it's not. And you should do that with other people. And there's this thing called game jams, where you can just like band up with other people and make a game, even when your contribution is very small. I think everyone welcomes a junior contributor. I know they're often intimidated by the amount of things that need to be done for a game.
Yeah.
But if you just say to a team, "Hi, I'm new. I can do this and this. I just want to try. Can I make something small?" Everyone will say yes. And you should keep that in mind. You shouldn't be ashamed. You shouldn't be intimidated.
Yeah. So you can actually like go out there and learn by doing game jams.
Yes. And the amount of people who will help you out, pull off the thing you want to do, is just, well, very large. This is the majority of people in this industry. Because the quirk of this industry is that we're, in theory, competing with each other, right? Like all the creators are competing.
Yeah.
But we don't feel like we're competing against each other. We are fighting the medium to put out the best work possible out there. So I don't think there's many jealous game devs that won't share knowledge with you.
That's really cool.
If you want to try, there's this website called itch.io, which you might have heard about.
Yeah.
It's like a marketplace of games, but it has this huge section of game jams. Mm-hmm. It's like on the top bar, and you can see which are starting and which are ending progress, and just pick one that you're interested in. You will find people that will help you.
That's really cool. Like I love that there's just a low entry point how do you call it? Low barrier entry to get into the thing after you've learned like a bit. So you have like a chance to see what it is in real, and
yes,
experience the thing before you fully dedicate your life to it, which is not possible for many other things.
That's true, because creation of a game is just pure chaos.
Yeah,
and this is your work life will be almost as chaotic as a game jam. Mm-hmm. So this is a good like a way to dip your toes into the hot water, and try the concepts.
If I got that correctly, so you let's say I'm interested in joining a game jam. I go to that homepage and is there like teams I can just like text to which already have like applied, or how do I get the team together?
Well, most of the time there's a Discord.
Okay.
Like connected to a game jam where you have a channel that's for looking for team members. There's a comment section in the on the webpage under the game jam. You can ask there, but my advice is not to do that because most people automatically just go to the Discord. And then just be honest, right? I'm a beginner. I want to do, I don't know, pixel art. I can do very simple objects like a plant or a well or a brick, and I want to contribute to a team. I can't do much, but I want to learn. I would take you in, like personally. If I saw that, I would take you in, just to give you the opportunity, right?
That's nice. Yeah. Okay. So even let's say you're not a game designer at all, and you're basically in quotation marks just an artist. That's like good with digital art. You could also just join in to get like a sniff of the game industry. Be like, yo, I can draw basically whatever. Just give me an idea. Depending on the game.
Yes,
probably.
I've had people do that.
Okay.
In game jams, I've had people just approach me and look, I can draw, but I don't know how this GameDev thing works.
Yeah,
and that's okay. I mean, drawing for games is just drawing that has to be processed in a certain way. Like I need to have a PNG file that has transparency underneath. If it's just like a 2D game, right?
Yeah,
that has transparency underneath, that doesn't exceed certain dimensions. That's 32-bit depth, and that's about it when it comes to 3D, 2D pictures. When it comes to 3D, it gets a little bit more complex because the thing you make in Blender for static scenes, like renders, are just way more complex than a game can handle usually. Just too much information, too much vertices, too much polygons, too much triangles on this model. It's too detailed. And then you have to learn to make a lower poly version of that. So that's a process in of itself. But just typing in YouTube how to retopologize, because that's what the process is called, a model for games will give you good results. So just look at that, try to like approach a game jam team and say, I want to make one model right? Just something to try.
Yeah.
So you can verify if it works for a game. That's fine, I guess. Somebody will take that.
Okay. So did you ever experience that after a game jam, like maybe a different dev like contacted you and was like, yo, I need help here, or are you interested in working with me? So is that also like kind of a
I
job
didn't,
market?
but I know that people get messages, right?
Okay.
I don't game jam that frequently, so my pool of experience isn't that big.
Fair
But I
enough.
have other team members just being messaged that we like this, and we know that you made this in this project.
Yeah.
So we want to hire you for something, or we want to have you consult for us in some matter, right? And this is even better for artists because the code, the logic of the game is kind of convoluted if there's a lot of people working on it, like three programmers. But like art can be easily attributed to someone. Like if you look like credited in the game, I did the animations of the main character, right? And someone will seek you out and offer a job. But I wouldn't count on jobs like long-term employment coming to you through game jams. There's just too much submissions to go through.
That would be the follow-up question. Who plays all these game jams? Is it mostly the other developers? Is there like a jury?
Yes.
Is that like publicly?
This is how it works most often.
Okay.
It's like a queue. You have to go through. That's managed by the HIO website of games that don't have enough ratings.
Oh. Okay.
And it's just common courtesy to play each other's games to give feedback and all that. And there are sometimes experts like a jury that will grade a game and pick a jury selection, right? You can, and the audience selection, right? It depends on the game jam.
Yeah.
So having someone who's a professional tell you that this thing in your game is great or this thing could use some work is just valuable feedback. Just as the audience score, right?
Yeah.
Someone commenting on your game and saying, look, in this spot, the character controls feel off. It's a bit jittery. I'm taking a star down for that. That's good feedback.
So do like people decide to make like a full game, or I don't know, probably it's already, I don't think they make a full game after a game jam. It's probably just a more of a smaller concept. But
I mean, there are games who were completed after a game jam.
Okay.
Against the Storm, I think, was a game jam concept, but more known, Super Hot. That was a game jam game. It can happen if you have a really good idea.
So everyone says like that. This shit's like really good. Let's make it a full game, basically.
Yeah. But then the problem is you can have a really good concept, but then you have to make a studio to complete it.
Oh.
And that's a lot of trouble on your head. So then you have to employ people, you have to figure out management, you have to do all that. But it's easier if you're just a one person, right?
Yeah.
I know that a lot of classic roguelikes get completed after the annual 7-day roguelike competition.
Okay.
Because this is usually just a single person making it.
That's cool. I like it. All right. I want to like go a bit further away from the original topic of game development. And I know we've talked about this before, but like, what do you think about innovation in game design?
Oh dear, you're opening that can of worms, aren't you?
I am.
Oh dear. I mean, this can go in so many directions at once. I'll try to pick one. I mean, I think we can all agree that innovation in the industry is kind of falling off. Like we're treading the same paths over and over.
Yeah.
Changing a bit of that and a bit of something else. But I think some people, very lot of people, would attribute that to risk aversion of large studios that dictates the market.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's entirely the case.
Okay.
Because the big innovation, usually, like in the 90s, came from trying to mimic other mediums, especially role-playing games. you had all this huge framework, but the technology wasn't there just to sustain something so complex.
Mhm.
But when you try to mimic like the old works of literature through like huge storytelling games, or like RPG systems in Baldur's Gate or Betrayal, or suddenly there was a possibility, and that was a huge leap. But now we've connected everything in game: literature, music, storytelling, RPG systems, board games, everything.
Yeah.
Now the easy references are gone.
Yeah.
And I think that's the core of the issue.
So maybe also the other way around. What was the last game you played where you thought that's really new, and what was that?
That's really new. Huh.
Like were surprised about the innovation that was there that you didn't see coming?
Was I surprised? Huh. That's a really hard question, because I wasn't like stunned, like in awe by a game for a long.
Okay.
I was very pleasantly surprised by Alex and how the world is carefully crafted, but that's just craftsmanship.
Yeah, also fair.
When it comes to like completely new mechanics, oh, it will be decades. It will be decades. It will date back to Doom. It will date back to Grondor games. It will date back to Baldur's Gate.
Okay.
I don't think I was like really in awe with the game, that I just couldn't imagine how someone like brought an idea to life in that particular one. But then again, I'm old, so I've seen a fair bit.
Yeah, but that's also like an interesting viewpoint, isn't it? Because like if you read like video game magazines that like rate games, every second like AAA game that comes out is like, this is the best shit ever. Oh my god, I couldn't imagine. And which obviously seems to be slightly bought, at least.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's exclusive to games.
Yeah. Sure.
I think I've mentioned that once in the stream, that I don't really read non-professional books anymore, unless it's like a report or something.
Yeah.
Because I've read so much literature when I was a young adult that everything I read now is just a remix of what I read earlier. It's just the same thing repeating. I think we, as the consumers of culture, mature too quickly for the creators to catch up with us.
Yeah, I can see that. It's becoming harder to read a good story, and especially reading a story where you don't feel like you've read that before.
Yeah,
I can definitely relate to that. Like I remember in my last vacation, I read like an apocalypse story, and like the new part about that was that it was happening on a cruise ship for the most part. So that kept me entertained enough to read through the whole thing. It was like 3 books, and I was on vacation, so it was fine. It's still like, in the end, it was just another apocalypse story with the usual apocalypse issues. So like, okay, we're running out of food, water. Someone has turned hostile. Someone's trying to betray us. Like, the average story. And yeah.
And depending on which particular story is the first of the kind that you read, you hold that one in higher regard and think it's more innovative than the others.
Yeah, funny enough, I think that's what happened to a lot of the so-called world-class literature. They were just literally the first to write it down.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Like most of that is just obscured by history and time.
True. I also asked myself what was the last game I played where I thought that's really new. And honestly, I think it mostly was Elden Ring. But that was because I didn't
say that.
Yeah, I mean, this game really impressed me for a long time. But that's also because I didn't play the Dark Souls series. So everything that happened there was really new.
Yeah, I was about to say that. For me, the shock was Dark Souls 1.
Yeah, of course.
Because I did not play Demon's Souls. I did not play action RPGs from PlayStation, because that's where this came from. So that was really fresh. And also what was really fresh was the subtle storytelling through world.
Mhm.
That was nice. I think that was innovative. But again, I might not have the reference needed to say that, oh, this is actually a derivative of something.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, so this is all very, very biased and very personal in the end.
It's as you said, basically. Like the first thing you see in that regard, you will hold it in high regard and be like, oh yeah, this shit was groundbreaking, but it was just groundbreaking for your own mind.
That's true, unless we're talking of Fallout 1. This is objectively the best game ever made.
Of course.
Naturally.
All right, is there any questions in chat? Because I would slowly start to wrap this up.
Don't be afraid, chat. I don't bite, usually.
Usually. No, to be fair, there was like another game that really impressed me lately. There was Need for Speed Unbound. Because I'm not much of a racing game guy, but that game was like super well done. It was like I was astonished by how smooth it runs.
Well, that speaks doesn't speak in a very positive way about the gaming market when you're astonished about a game that runs smooth.
Yeah, and like the art, no, it was mostly the art direction. That was like really well done because they mixed like the Fortnite style of characters with a real looking world, and then they draw like little comic wings on your car when you, like, for example, did a jump.
Yep. I think strong art direction is something that's really lacking in games for them to be unique experience. I think the big problem that we have that can be solved is the lack of artistic direction.
Yes.
In games. Because we don't need to have a huge artistic budget with lots of artists, but we do need to have a person, an art director, that will figure out how to tie a game's visual language together to be cohesive with the experience.
Yeah.
And many games just don't do that. They go for very realistic shaders, art styles that have been tried and beaten to death. But they're not unique in that way. And since humans are visual creatures, it does take a lot away from the experience, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's also bold decisions, because I do see this as a bold decision to take a realistic looking game and put comic elements into it. Yeah. And not like, I don't think I've seen that before, at least not to my knowledge.
I think I saw, but I don't want to attribute that to the wrong game.
Okay.
But it's rare. It's most obviously.
Okay. Like another game in terms of art direction that came to mind was Scorn.
Yes.
I mean, yes. That game is just, it's more like a walk through a gallery. Like gameplay-wise, it wasn't insane, but the art was just breathtaking.
Yeah, you just progress through a game to see more of the art.
Exactly. All right.
Okay, no questions from chat.
Fair enough. So thank you so much for hopping into the call. I enjoyed that talk a lot.
Thank you. That was nice.
Is there anything you want to advertise for at the end of this?
Well, I should say buy our game, Thief Simulator Greenview Street on Quest 2, if you like sneaking games. I can say that people like it and we care for it.
Beautiful. All right, then. Thank you for the talk. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. See you around.